Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Content Planning Party. Brogan and I are absolutely thrilled that you are here and that you've joined us for this planning party today. We are so grateful that you guys shared where you're from and that we've got people from all over the States, and we've got Europe represented on this call, and we've got a few Canadians, so yay for that. And some of the reasons why you might be here today on this call is because you might feel overwhelmed with all the content you need to create, or maybe you want support to create a plan that you can actually implement. You might just need accountability to plan your content ahead of time. Like, I know that's a huge thing for me. If I know I'm accountable and I've got something in my schedule to create a plan, it makes it that much easier to then follow through and actually do it. And maybe you've been to planning parties before, and you know that it's one of the best ways to plan. So what I would love for you guys to do in the chat, so we can get to know you as we're going through this live training today, is let us know what your biggest content struggle is, or why are you here? Why are you here on this call today? And what is it that is kind of motivating you to be on this call, to learn and to jump in here? We would love to know that. So feel free to put that in the chat. And yeah, Brogan.
Yes, so while you're letting us know while you're here, I'm just going to do a couple of little housekeeping things. So what to have with you. So make sure that you've got your calendar, either digital or hard copy, whatever you usually use, just make sure you've got that within reach. Also the worksheet that Catherine already mentioned, either have that printed off if you like to scribble things down, use the digital copy, wow, my brain's not working. Or I kind of like to do like a little mix, like I'll have the digital version and I'll also have a notebook as well. So you can kind of mix and match and do whatever works for you. If you are somebody who has ideas all over the place and not just in one nice little package, go and make sure that you've got like the notes app open on your phone. Go get that random Trello list that you hide ideas in. Just make sure that you've got those kind of things open. If you have ideas in a couple of different notebooks, make sure you've got them all close at hand. And then the final thing is just to be focused. This is kind of like, you know, we hear this all of the time, but it is really important. Try and turn off any distractions, remove any notifications that you don't need, grab a snack if you need one, or some coffee if it's like early in the morning for you to get those brain juices firing. And that's everything that we need. So what we're going to cover is we are going to do a quick review of the past quarter, lessons learned and different questions to ask to help you do that. We're also going to have a look at the vision for your content and what you actually want it to look like, because there's no point in creating stuff if you don't actually know where you're going. Catherine's then going to walk us through priorities, because as we know, we can't do all the things. So we're going to find out how we can focus on what is most important to us. And then we're going to create our content plan for the next 90 days. And most importantly, put that into our schedule, because, you know, you can have a pretty plan, but if it's not actually in there, you're not going to get it done. All right, so we've got oh man, there's so many good, I've got to like scroll back up. There's like heaps in the chat. Okay, so we have got people who are wanting to use fresh content, consistency for core content. Kate has a new project that she's creating for, and wants to come up with a plan that matches her current energy. That is really good, Kate. I love that. Catherine has popped in the chat as well. So aside from running this planning party, yes, because that's also on our content plan. She is slowly coming back into content in Instagram. Tabitha, biggest struggle is actually writing the posts and planning. So she has a ton of topics, but then where to actually start. Yeah, cool. So we're definitely going to go through some of that stuff today. So that will be really helpful. And then Emily is similar to Catherine, returned to full-time job and finding content. Yeah, with more limited time, finding content creation, trying to make that happen when you've got other things going on. Yes. So We know, we understand that. And as you will, if you haven't met either of us, and Catherine and I are just going to do like a really quick intro in case you have no idea who we are. But in a nutshell, like our approach is so like anti-hustle that it's not even funny. So like we, you know, this approach is going to show you that you can still get awesome stuff done, but you don't have to have crazy plans or be pushing yourself constantly all of the time to make things happen. So in saying that, if you haven't met me, I'm Brogan. I'm a writer and content strategist, and I specialize in helping busy entrepreneurs and small business owners to create content in their own way and to be able to have fun while they do it, because I truly believe that there is no point in doing content if it's not fun. Because seriously, we don't have enough time if it's not going to be fun. And one of the reasons that I love planning parties in general. If you've been in Catherine's community for a while, you've probably been to a planning party. And I just love the framework of them. They literally helped me go from a total hot mess express who tried to do 50 million things at once and then wondered why she was stressed out and never made any progress, to actually be able to pull things back a little bit, learn to prioritize, and to clear out some of that like physical and mental clutter, and to actually create space to be able to create the things that I wanted to do. And so we have taken that framework of Catherine's and applied it to content. And so that's what we're going to do today.
Yeah, so good. And I'm really glad you're here. And what it means to me is like, you're serious about planning, about figuring out content. You're finally realizing like, you know what, like I could maybe use some fresh ideas or some fresh support, or, you know, I could use a bit of an accountability. And so we're really glad that you're here and you're creating time in your schedule to do this. I am really passionate about living an intentional and planned life. And I won't go into my whole story, but at 25, I was clinically depressed, in constant pain and just dealing with a lot of stuff. And so I began this journey, which then morphed into Modern Planner. And about 2 years ago, I started hosting, well, it's been 3 years now, guys. Okay, 3 years ago, I started hosting planning parties, and they've really become a pillar of the Modern Planner community. However, my content has never been my strength. And so since meeting Brogan, I've been able to streamline my content, let go of so many different rules. And that's why we do this training together, because we've both helped each other. And in turn, we want to support other people with that. And so one of the things I said on my Instagram stories yesterday, which I think is just a great kind of lead in here, is that my journey with content has been really interesting. So when I first started my business, it started with being very planned and organized, and I followed like all the rules that were out there. But I was really overwhelmed. And so then came this season when I met Brogan of like getting comfortable with experimenting and finding my voice and like figuring things out. And now I understand what works for me. I have that kind of foundation. And now it's just about regularly checking in with myself, making sure I'm on the right track, and then shifting things as needed. So we love, by the way, interactive. And so we want you guys to comment. What we are going to do is we are going to have a specific Q&A section at the end. So we're really trying today just to go through the framework, walk it through with you guys, work through it, and we're going to answer probably not all of your questions as we go, and we'll address some of those more at the end. But I do want to touch down on Gloria Jean's question, kind of what is our 90-day actual period? If you're like me, I'm probably not going to get beyond the next 2 months. So for me, it's like May and June and just kind of finishing up this quarter. If you're watching the replay, it's whatever 90 days are ahead of you. And if you're on this call and you're like, yeah, you know what, I'll just do May, June, July and do that. Don't feel like you need to be restricted by the quarters of the year and like how they're defined. Just think about the next 60 to 90 days, and kind of do that. So I just wanted to talk about that, especially if you're watching the replay. It could be any time of year for you right now. So we don't want you to feel limited by those calendar years. So let's jump in and get started. Back to you, Brogan.
Yay. Okay. So we are going to, if you've got your workbook printed out, open it up to the reflection section. So this is probably one of, I'm trying not to say this at like every single section, that it's the most important section, because everything seems important. But reflection really is important. And it is one of those things where it's like, if, you know, it's that whole, like, if you don't actually take time to stop and pause, you're just going to keep going, doing the same thing that you've always done, and then nothing will ever change. So what we want you to do is to reflect back on the last few months of content. Now, given the whole current world situation, this might have thrown things, or probably has thrown things, a little bit more out of whack. So if you need to look a little bit further back than the past couple of months, maybe, you know, towards the end of last year, or just thinking back to a time where maybe, you know, you were a bit more consistent in the frequency that you were publishing things in. So tweak it to make sense for you. But just think back to the last few months or quarter or whatever of when you were creating content. We've got a couple of different questions that you can go through that are listed out for you in the workbook. You can answer some of these, all of these, it really doesn't matter. Just pick the ones that make the most sense for you. I will just mention the one right at the end. So this is usually its own exercise, but we've kind of just pulled it in as a reflection prompt this time, and that's the resistance buster. If you have never done this before, I would highly recommend that you give it a shot, because it is really helpful in getting inside your head and figuring out what you actually feel about the content that you create. So the resistance buster works in that you ask yourself, you write down like what the stories are that you are telling yourself about your content, your writing, the things you post on Instagram. And then you look at how you can flip that script and change those stories into something more positive and helpful. So for example, a story that you might tell yourself is that I suck at writing. Just a, you know, a basic one. So then you go to yourself, okay, cool, like that's obviously not very helpful. How can I flip that script into something that is more positive? And maybe you change it to, the more that I practice, the better that I get. Or the more that I put myself out there, the more that I can share my message with those who really need it. And that's the most important thing. So think about things like that as you're going through these reflection prompts. So we're going to just take a couple of minutes now to work through these prompts. So pick the ones that make the most sense for you, reflect back, ask yourself those questions. I'm going to set a 3-minute timer, and then we will be back.
All right. So hopefully that reflection time really helped you, even if it was just one thing that you noticed about the last couple months and what it was that you've done that has resonated well with you. Like, for instance, I haven't done a ton of copy in the last couple months, or content, or like I've not done a whole lot. But what I have done, what's been the most easy, like what has flowed with ease for me, has been Facebook Live trainings. And it's just that reminder of like, yeah, Catherine, you love live, you show up well live, you serve people well live, you need to just do that more. And so for me, that's as simple as that reflection section, what that brought up for me. And that's going to really influence what I do moving forward, because it's such a great reminder. So what we want to look at now is our priorities. And when creating and defining your priorities for content for an upcoming period of time, be that the next month or 60 days or 90 days, there are some really important things to take into account. So from an intentional living perspective, you want to be thinking about your vision, your word for the year. When you sat down in December or January and you started thinking about this year, what came up for you? What did you see as priorities for yourself? What did you see as goals? What did you write down as experience statements? Who are your family and friends? What season of life are you in? What current commitments do you have? These are all things that affect our priorities. But what happens so often is that we're like, okay, well, the most important thing needs to be getting my email list up to this and showing up here on Instagram or creating this Facebook group or doing these things. And we actually like forget that we have a life and that we're these people with these full lives and all these different hats that we're wearing. And so our priorities really need to, specifically for content, really need to stem from this perspective of what else is going on in my entire life okay, now how does content support those things and where I'm wanting to move in this direction with my business or with my career? And so that's what we want you to think of. And so, Brogan, you go ahead and add your little comment in here.
My little comment. Oh, I
Yeah.
feel like we're in like a newsroom. I'm like, it's like, over to you. Okay,
Yeah.
so
True.
the reason why it's so important to start with these intentional living prompts, and like literally, it doesn't matter how many times like Catherine and I kind of run this, we're always like, okay, guys, like we're gonna get to the content planning part. We promise we're going to get there. But the reason why we stress like the reflection and the prioritizing part is, as some of you have already said in the chat, it's like, you guys have got a lot of other things going on. You've started a new job. You've got kids at home. There's like a whole world pandemic going on. There's other things that are going on in our lives, and you don't create content in a vacuum. But a lot of the times we act like we do. We, like Catherine was saying, we try and like go crazy with email marketing whilst also redoing our website and starting a blog and starting a new YouTube channel and thinking about starting a podcast and all of the other things that we want to do. So before you even start thinking about, okay, like what content do I want to create? Like take this step back and look at your life and business as a whole, and use that to set your priorities, and then make your content fit into your priorities, because that is what is going to keep you successful in the long run.
Yes, absolutely. So what we want you to do for a couple minutes right now is think about, step back and look big picture. If you had a vision for the year or a focus word for the year, if you set goals or priorities for this year, if you are a set vision plan change student and you wrote experience statements for this year, like let's write that down. And if you're like, so forget content, I haven't done any of that for this year, like it just doesn't exist. I did no planning or dreaming or focusing for this year. That's okay. Take these few minutes to go, all right, with what's left of this year, what do I want my focus to be? What do I want my priorities to be? What are some of the goals I'd like to see? And again, remember, we want to keep this focused and not have 15 goals, and because that is not focus. So we're going to give you a couple minutes to do that, and then I'll come back and we'll talk about those 3 priorities for the quarter. So don't jump ahead to that. We'll just give you a quick 2 minutes to kind of write down and refresh yourself on, I'm just going to start my timer, a quick 2 minutes to refresh yourself on this year and what you'd like to see. And then we'll talk about the quarter after that. All right, so hopefully that step back was really helpful for you. I know that it was for me. I just went back and was like, okay, like what was my focus word for the year? Because, the last couple months have been a little crazy for all of us. And looking back at what some of these goals and priorities are and realizing that like, yeah, like my business and creating content for my business is one of like 5 things I want to really move forward this year. So, it is not going to get hours and hours and hours of my week. So what, it's just these reminders. So now that you've stepped back and you have looked at, okay, these are my priorities for this year. This is kind of what I'm wanting to create and the kind of life I want to create. Because remember, we want to not start with, these are my content goals and this is what I want to create. So how do I fit that into my life? We start with, what kind of life are you wanting to create? What kind of ease and flow are you wanting to do? That's why I loved Kate's comment earlier about, I have a new project and I want to figure out and create a plan for my content that flows with the amount of energy I have to give it. For me, it looks like I have 1 hour a week to create content for my business. What is that going to look like? How can I use what I'm best at to create that content so that it makes it easy, right? So now what we want you to do is look ahead and actually think about content. If you think about these next couple months with content, what are your top 3 content priorities? So when you're looking at what it is that you want to do, okay, based on this, how can I make the most of the time I have, the energy I have, and what do I think are the 3 priorities that I should have when it comes to my content? So hopefully that makes sense for you guys. Brogan, do you have anything that you want to add in there?
Just a reminder to not go crazy with this. Don't just have like create a new website, like as your, I mean, that's a great goal, but like break that thing down. break it down into what it actually includes. And also too, if you do have a really big goal like that, like rewriting your website copy, or like Kate was saying, creating content for a whole new project, you don't have to have 3 priorities. Like, you can have 1. If your project is huge, like maybe you're just going to have 1 priority, and that's okay as well.
Yeah, I love that. It's so good. And it's this reminder. This is why we make you only choose 3. Because you can have a wish list of all the things you'd love to do with your content, but realistically, what are 3 things that you can focus on and move forward and that you think you can commit to? So for instance, that website example, for me, what that looks like is I want to get my homepage up. I haven't had a homepage on my website for 3 years. Woohoo! I've been doing it all backwards, right? And so it's like, I want to get my homepage with my opt-in. That's one of my priorities, right? Like having that up. And so we want you to be really specific, be really targeted. I'm so glad that reminder was just for you, Kate. But I think it's for a lot of us. I think a lot of us need to be reminded that like we can only take on so much. So let's be really focused with what it is that we're doing. All right, so I'm going to give you just like about a minute or so to try to define those 3 things before we move on, and then we will start planning. All right, so how is everyone feeling about having priorities? This is really hard, and to be honest, I at first was like, I have 4, I can't get rid of 4. And then what I realized is I was dividing out the different platforms as their own priorities, as opposed to saying, I want to do 2-week blocks of content. And I'm going to share that in multiple ways. And so for me, I was like, oh, I've got all these things to do. And I'm like, no, I'm going to pick one theme for 2 weeks, and I'm going to share about it, and I'm going to reuse that content in multiple ways. And so this is just another example, you guys, of why I do this with Brogan, so you guys can see like real human struggles, even though we're the teachers. Like, this is just a constant journey, right? And so realizing like, yeah, like, no, I'm not having my newsletter as one thing and my Instagram content is another and my Facebook group is another. Like, no, I'm going to do 2-week blocks of content. That is the big thing I'm going to focus on. And I'm maybe going to start with just 2 of those places. And once I get consistent with them, I'll add that 3rd location, right? So just some more examples. I love it. So let's talk about actually planning, which I can geek out on for forever. And so Brogan will let me know if I go on, but I'll try to keep this short and sweet, especially because it is really simple. And a lot of people are like, Catherine, you can't simplify planning. Like, planning is big and complicated and scary, and I never do it, and I don't follow through, and I've just given up, and like all these things. And then there's other people that like geek out on planning and love planning, and we could probably chat for hours about our planning methodologies. So I have taken planning and broken it down into 4 really simple approaches to help make planning very accessible and simple to do. So these 4 approaches are, the first one is next step. A lot of times planning can feel very overwhelming and big. For instance, a website overdue, like completely overhauling your website. That can feel really overwhelming. However, so that might be an example of when you'd want to use the next step approach to planning, which is, okay, I need to do my website. What's the next thing I need to do? And you write that down, you do it. And then you're like, okay, now what's the next thing I need to do? You write it down, you go do it. Why do we write it down? Because we write down everything we plan. That way, the next time we have to do something similar, we have it all documented. Wink, wink. I can't wink well, so I'm not actually going to do that. That would be dismal. So that is the next step approach. It's literally just saying, what's the next thing to do for this? Taking action. This also works really well if you've got a big project, but you aren't defined to a specific deadline. Okay, so that wouldn't work well if you're hosting something live, or you're launching a course, or you have a podcast date when something has to go out because you've put it out to everyone. I mean, you can still renegotiate, but we won't jump into that. So that's next step. The second planning approach is project plan. So project plan is when you're like, okay, this is a big project. What's my end goal? What are these big phases that I need to get done? What are all the little action items? And we literally do a brain dump trying to get everything out of our brain onto paper, all the tiny little things. We map it out chronologically, and then we're like, okay, this is what I need to do. And then we just follow that plan. So that's the project plan. The third thing, which this might make some of you guys laugh, is daily habit. And the reason why this is a planning approach is because a lot of people don't think about this. They might be like, I've given up on planning, but they have rock solid daily habits. Can I just tell you, daily habits is a form of planning, because what you're saying is, I want to become healthier. I want to have good hygiene. So I'm going to shower every day and brush my teeth and take my makeup off at night. And it's like you're planning ahead for a future you that you want to be, right? So habits are planning. So you might just say, you know what? I want a daily habit of posting on Instagram stories every day. Just one little thing. I'm going to go live once a day with a tiny little thing. I would say that Kate is really good at this. That's just me bragging on somebody who's on this live who I know, but she just does really great at always sharing these little tiny pieces of her life. And I would consider that to be a daily habit. The fourth planning approach is weekly action. So this is where you say, okay, I want to do this. I need to set aside this much time every week to create this content, to work on this project and move it forward. Okay, so those are the 4 planning approaches, and I'm going to let Brogan carry on with this next piece because I think it's important.
Yeah, so this is for those of you who tend to be a little bit more creatively minded, I guess you could say. Maybe not so, not always thinking and planning in like a linear kind of fashion. You can combine 1, 2, or all of those planning approaches. And this took me a really long time to figure out. I don't know why. When I first started doing planning parties with Catherine, I was like, no, like I'm also too, since I've been in quarantine, I've been really getting into the Enneagram, and I am like so type 1 perfectionist. It's not even funny. And so I'm always just like, no, there is one true answer. I can only pick like one project. Like I have to do a project plan, or I have to do a habit. Like that's it. And it took me a really long time to go, no, mix them up, take the best bits from each one and kind of make your own, like Frankenstein's monster, but a nice happy one. Take the bits. I also have really weird analogies, guys, just in case you haven't realized by now. So if there are parts of a project plan that you really like, so maybe like the bigger picture structure, but you don't like getting down into the super fine nitty gritty detail, maybe combine the bigger picture of a project plan with the next step approach or with a daily habit. Like look at different ways and what makes sense for the content that you're creating. And don't just think that you have to pick one. Look at how you can mix and match things and just test things out and see what works for you, because what might sound really good on paper may potentially not work for you in actual real life. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Yeah, your plans absolutely can be adjusted.
And on that note, you might choose right now on this call what you think your planning approach is going to be for each of those priorities. And in a week or two, you might be like, this isn't working. But rather than throw out your content priority, which you've very intentionally chosen, change your planning approach. Okay. So what I want you guys to do is we're just going to give you like 2 minutes, and I want you to go into the worksheet and I want you to write down what your 3 priorities are. Now this is on page 5, just so you guys know. So write down what your 3 priorities are, and then write down what approach or combination of approaches you are going to use to then execute on that over the next few months. Okay, so I'm just going to set a timer, and let's do that, and then we'll be back. All right, so hopefully you guys are able to have a little bit of focus and say, okay, these are my priorities. This is how I think I'm going to approach it. So now what I want you to do, and we're just going to talk you through this. We're not actually going to set a timer. But what we want you to do is pick one of those priorities to focus on now for the rest of the call. So we acknowledge that we are not going to get through all 3 of those things and planning and creating all the details and scheduling it all out on this call. We want to give you the tools so you can finish this on your own time and be able to set aside a few more minutes later today or tomorrow or next week and be like, okay, now I know what to do and I can do the rest of this. So we want you to just pick one. So let us know in the chat your one content project or one content focus that you want to now kind of plan and work on for a few more minutes together. And this is what we'll use for examples. So I want you to post it in the chat. Let us know what it is going to be and what your plan is going to be, because we want to support you in this. And so I'm going to mute myself and type it in myself, because you guys don't need to hear all my typing away, but I will add it in the chat too. Okay, so I think we've got everybody typing that out. So we've got a website revamp, we've got a project that's happening in June, 2 weeks of content. Love that. 2-week themes is mine, my 2-week content themes, like kind of figuring out what my structure is going to be. We've got mapping out a new in-depth guides, that are replacing regular blog posts. Showing up on IG daily. I love that, Terry. So creating that plan for how can I actually do this on a regular basis. So that is so great. So now that you have your main objective, we're going to create a plan. So remember, a key to a successful plan is acting on it. Okay, I have the Modern Planner framework, and what I say, what those 4 steps are is prioritize, plan, act, adjust. If you leave out any of those pieces, including acting, you're not going to actually be moving your plan forward. So you can have the most beautiful plans in the world, the most detailed, but if you don't actually just take action and try it, that's where, as a over planner, I was going to say, a recovering over planner, is that a good way to put it? Brogan really pushed me to experiment. She's like, just try something. See what happens. See if you like it. And I realized things about myself and my content that I did like. So don't get stuck on the plan. We're going to give you, Brogan's just going to give us a little word of warning. And then we're going to take about 5 minutes, and we want you to really outline this content project and what you're going to do and what that's going to look like, and put it down on paper. So Brogan, your word of warning.
Crossing over to me on the other side of the world. Yeah. So just, again, just to reiterate what we've kind of been talking about this whole call, is when you are looking at your one priority, some of you may want to leap ahead and map out what the entire quarter is going to look like and get really super specific and really detailed, and that is not always the best idea. Especially with things like content and with what Catherine was talking about before, we need to be able to be nimble. We need to be able to adjust, because a lot of putting your plan into practice is going to be through experimentation, and finding out what actually works for you, trying different productivity techniques, trying different content types, trying different content methods, different strategies to see what actually works for you. So yes, we're saying plan out a quarter, but don't think that you need to get super nitty gritty into the details of that. If it helps, just think of the next month and go, okay, what do I need to get done in the next month in order to help me get closer to achieving this content goal that I have, and be okay with keeping it a little bit loose. I know this is scary, okay? Don't worry. I've walked clients through this. I've walked Catherine through this. I know you can freak out about it, okay? But you are going to be fine, and you will get through the other side. I am actually I am so proud of Catherine, even just the fact that she can just jump into experiments right now and actually be excited about them. That is completely different to how she was, even a year ago, of when I first suggested it to her. You literally should have seen her face. She almost had her brain just stopped. It's she just was what, I can't even compute this. So it can be scary if it's not something that you're used to doing. but it does get easier over time. And I know that's such a cliche, but it's true. The more that you do something, the better that you're going to get at it. The more that you put this content planning approach into practice, the easier that it's going to get. And the better you're going to know yourself and what actually works for you as well. And that's what makes the whole process a lot faster, because then you can then filter out all of the stuff that you know doesn't work for you, and you can just focus on the stuff that you know does work for you. So that's just a little reminder as you're, you know, starting to map out these plans. Yeah, leave yourself open to a little bit of flexibility and experimentation.
Because as we say in the Modern Planner community, life does not always go as planned. Even though life well planned is a life well lived, life doesn't always go as planned. And so if we plan too small and granular too far out, we end up kind of not wasting our time, because we're still learning about ourselves, but we can invest a lot of time planning that then isn't helpful down the road because things change and adjust. So having bigger kind of steps and plans are good, and having timelines, and then only get detailed for like the next 2, 3, 4 weeks ahead. And that will help you and keep you from over planning, which is a pitfall we can all fall into, especially those of us that like love planning. Okay, so we are going to give you a few minutes right now just to actually work out. Maybe it's writing a project plan or all these different actions you think. Just brain dump what you are going to do and how you're going to do it, and maybe reminders of working with your energy or what time of day might be best. Just get everything you're thinking about for this one priority onto paper, and then we'll check back in with you in a few more minutes. And yeah, we can't wait to see what you guys come up with. All right, so good. I truly hope that getting your stuff out on paper, even if it's not fully formed, even if you're like, I'm not exactly sure what date or when I'm going to do this or what it's going to look like, at least you're getting those things out of your head and onto paper, and you're like, you've got a start. And now you have some of those tools to be like, okay, now what I'm going to do. So speaking of tools, Brogan is going to give us a bunch of tips and ideas on how we can take that to the next level.
Yes. So now we're going to talk, and you can kind of like keep working through this section too while I'm talking. This and all of the tips that I'm going to mention are on the last page in the workbook, I'm pretty sure. And so these are just different techniques that both Catherine and I have tried and have found to be really helpful. And so we're just leaving them here as an encouragement to, like, you know, try new things and see what works for you and what kind of scheduling techniques are best for you and for your particular project that you're focusing on. So the first one is probably the most obvious, and that's time blocking, which is exactly what it sounds. This is where you set aside blocks of time in your schedule to help you accomplish the things that you actually want to get done. And within this time block, you can experiment with what works for you. You can try, like Kate was saying, how she just sets aside, sorry, Kate, we're using you as an example for like everything tonight or this morning, wherever you are in the world. But you can set, you know, like a 10-minute window of like, you're just gonna be like, okay, I'm gonna block off 10 minutes every single morning, see how much I can get done in that amount of time. You can try a power hour, or you can try a longer 2 to 3 hour session, or even longer than that, if that's what works best for you. Another one that's also talked about a lot is batching. And I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with batching. I also get on a bit of a bandwagon, but I'm going to try and keep this nice and short. So batching can be great, and it can work for different people and for different projects. So all I would say for that is, again, just experiment and see what works for you. But the idea is that you can get some momentum by actually batching similar tasks together, which in theory sounds amazing. So the idea is kind of similar. And I actually wrote this down in my plan when I was brainstorming some stuff. So the idea of batching is like, instead of making like one cupcake, you make like a whole tray of cupcakes at one time, because it doesn't make sense to make one cupcake. And for stuff like Instagram posts, or maybe a weekly newsletter, if you have a more like simplified format of the newsletter, that makes sense in that situation. But for other things, sometimes batching doesn't make sense. And I actually wrote this down in for my plan. So I was talking about how my focus is working on what I'm calling these bigger in-depth content guides. Instead of doing regular weekly blog posts, I'm now creating, they're basically like they're massive. They're 6,000 plus word guides, super in-depth on particular topics. And for me, it makes more sense in my brain to do them one at a time. It makes more sense for me to focus on the one cupcake and make it like Master Chef level cupcake rather than trying to do all of them at the one time. So that's what I mean about batching. Like, just see if it works. It might work for you, it might not. Just test it out. And it also can vary on the project that you're doing as well. We've already touched on daily and weekly habits, but this is a really good one if batching doesn't work for you, because sometimes just setting aside like regular time every single day or every single week can really be helpful to just keep things moving without, you know, thinking, oh no, I have to have a big chunk of time set aside. One that I've been loving really like a lot lately is the Pomodoro technique. Traditionally, this is done as a 25-minute work session with a 5-minute break, and then you do that 4 times, take a longer break, and then repeat the cycle again. But guess what, guys? You can do whatever you want. You don't have to do a 25-minute work session. You could do a 20-minute work session. You could do in half an hour. You could do an hour. You could do a 3-hour if you want to. Like, you can make it work for you. But what I really like about it is, especially during times like now, which is where everything's kind of a little bit up in the air, things are very uncertain, it just kind of helps to add structure and stability back into your work routine. And so if you've been finding it really difficult to stay focused and to actually produce things, give the Pomodoro technique a try and just see if it works for you. And then also the final one, again, we've been talking about this like the whole time, but it's to prioritize. Be clear and realistic about what else you allow into your schedule, because like we said, you don't create content in a vacuum. And so it's really important to keep that bigger picture in mind and be okay with shifting your own deadlines if you need to. I've been meaning to launch my new website for the past 3 months and it just hasn't happened. It's turning into, it's realistically, it's a 6-month project. And like, that's what what it always needed to be. And so sometimes that's how things go as well. It's just as you actually get into them, you realize, oh, okay, no, this was actually bigger than what I thought. So that's just something to keep in mind as well.
I would also like to point out that the opposite is also true. Sometimes we get into something that we're like, oh, that's not that big. And then as we get into it, we're like, oh my goodness, this is going to take me way longer to create, i.e. a website launch. Other times we psych ourselves out. It's like, oh my goodness, I can't do an IGTV, or I can't go live on my Facebook page or my business page or in my group because like it's going to be all of this and the tech and the whatever. And like, we make these things seem so much bigger with content than sometimes they are. And sometimes it's like, oh, I did 5 minutes of research. I figured this out. I have 3 points that I'm going to talk about. I'm going to go live and do it. And then it's over. And we're like, and why was I so worried about that? And so that I just really wanted to point that out, because we all struggle with content in different ways. And sometimes these things that we're like, oh yeah, that's no big deal, I can get it done, end up becoming a lot bigger because we realize how much is there. And sometimes the opposite is true, and really being aware about that. So yeah, I think we've all been that person sometimes where we like psych ourselves out for how big it's going to be, and just taking small little steps. And the other thing that I just wanted to add in terms of like an actual thing, like Brogan talked about time blocking, setting aside blocks of time in your schedule. But I just really want to reiterate that what you put in your calendar has a much higher chance of getting done. If you're like, oh yeah, I'll do that on Thursday, but you don't put it in as an appointment in your calendar, the likelihood of it getting done is very, very low. So you don't need to block your days and schedule your days out every 30 minutes at a time. Please don't do that.
Come on, man.
However, what is helpful is for you to say, okay, I'm going to give myself a 1 to 2 hours to kind of look at this project. And then I've got my client work. And then I've got this. And like, think about those pieces that you have in your business and try to give yourself time to do them. And then once you're there, be like, okay, what content am I going to work on? What's that next thing? As opposed to being too prescriptive, but still put it in your calendar. So speaking about your calendar, open it up right now. Because what are we going to do?
Yes. All right. So now what we want you to do is, yes, like Catherine said, open up that calendar, and in the next week or two, that's an important part too. Like, don't put it off into some far-fetched, perfect time or perfect day. In the next week or two, set aside some time to complete your content plan for the next month, for the next quarter, for whatever it is. And just give yourself, at least an hour if you can, especially if you've got like a bigger project. Just give yourself that time, make it an appointment with yourself that you do everything you can to stick to. And make it happen. Because that's the most important bit, is turning all of these great ideas into actual tangible things that go out into the world and that are actually helping people. And that are, creating results for you in that way as well. So that's important as well.
All right, so Brogan is going to pull up some slides because we're going to do some Q&A. So what I am going to be doing right now is, if you have questions about what we've talked about, if you have specific examples of maybe one of the priorities that you chose or the content project that you are working on, and you're like, I don't know what my timeline is. Am I being realistic, or am I thinking I could get this done in a month, but really based on your experience, you guys think it might take longer? If you've got any really practical questions and things that you'd like us to address, put them in the chat. What I will be doing is copying them all down into our document and our agenda. And then after we share some really exciting news with you guys, we are going to do all of that Q&A, and we'll have a few minutes to really just dive into some of those specific examples and questions that you guys might have. So now is your time to think about, okay, over this last hour, what is it that's been coming up for me that I'm struggling with, that I'm not sure how to apply? And we will do our best to get through all of those questions in just a few minutes. So is that good? I will mute myself for right now.
Yeah, no, it's okay. It's just Zoom changed where stuff went. And I'm like, wait, where is it? But I found it. It's all good.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, one moment, please. All right. So can everyone see those slides? Are they up? All right, awesome. Okay, so Catherine and I just want to take a couple of minutes to talk about one of our favorite things of all time, apart from planning parties, which are also our favorite thing. This is like next level favorite thing of ours. So this is something that we spent so much time thinking about and talking about, like from when we very first met, was to be able to combine our powers like Captain Planet. In the comments, if anyone watched that cartoon in the 90s, let me know. And together we created Cultivate Your Content. And this is the high touch program that gives you hand-picked strategies for stress-free content. Like I said, it is literally one of our favorite things of all time. And the main reason that we decided to create it is because if you look around the internet these days, it seems like creating content just became a competition. And it's almost like, when did that even happen? We often feel like we always have to be switched on, always creating, always doing things, when, let's be real, like some days you just want to stay in your sweatpants and you don't want to think about going on Instagram stories, and you don't want to like be thinking about what's going on with your hair so that you can, do an Instagram story. Because sometimes we just don't want to do that. But even if you're like, you know what, that's not me. Sometimes I'm fine with like not doing content or not doing stuff. Even if you haven't felt like pushed to keep up with that hustle brigade, you've probably still said yes to way too many content projects, or way too many opportunities, and like burnt yourself out in the process. One of our students of Cultivate Your Content, before she joined, said, I used to spend so much time making content and it felt like it was getting me nowhere. And that totally sucks. And that is not where we want you to be.
And so we decided to do something about it because both of us have experienced this in our own and with a lot of the clients and the communities that we've worked with over the years. And so we decided to create a program that really supported people through this process. And so we've designed it to be a 5 week. It's not super long. If you've got an hour or two each week, you can move through this, watch the videos, do the exercises, and the things that you'll learn in this program are why you need to know where you're going and what it means to be intentional, how to do content your way. We dive into that even more and prune what you don't need. There's a lot of really fun hands-on activities that help you figure out what content best suits you. And then we also are going to teach you how to keep content fun so that you don't feel like taking a bulldozer to what you produce, because you don't need to just get rid of all the things you've ever done in the past and reinvent things. We also want to talk to you about how to experiment without burning yourself out and give your ideas room to grow and how to walk through that. Plus, there's a lot of practical and fun projects to keep your ideas blooming. Also, we got to give huge props to Brogan for her amazing gardening analogies. All right, so we'll walk through the 5 week framework for you guys.
Yeah, I did go a bit crazy with the analogies, guys. So like we said right at the start, so we decided to break this down into a 5 week program. That doesn't mean that you have to do it in 5 weeks. Just want to point that out. Like, you can take as much or as little time to go through this as you like. We've just seen that people have gotten the best results when they do follow this framework. And so we're just going to go through this like super quickly. You can see all of the modules and everything that is included on the website, cultivateyourcontent.com. But in a nutshell, in week 1, we start way at the beginning and we lay the groundwork. So this is a really important step. So this is where we refine your vision, clarify your goals, so that you can ask the right questions to support you in creating content in your own way. Because if you don't know where you're going, that's where you kind of get confused and when you start creating content that you don't really need to create. And so that's what the first 3 modules are really designed to help you do. The second week is where you design your content garden site plan. So just like any good landscape gardener, this is where you decide what your content garden is actually going to look like, how you're going to use it, how it's going to feel, and how you're going to use your content to improve your overall business ecosystem. And that is so important because, like we said, content is not created in a vacuum. You need to figure out how it fits into the bigger landscape and into the bigger picture.
All right, so week 3 is about inspecting your content health and really looking at, okay, what do we believe about content? What are the things that we're believing that actually aren't helping us? And we dive into mindset and looking at some of the ideas that we have and what is really helpful for us to be able to learn and to grow in so that we can continue to just move forward in a really healthy way. There's nothing worse than like trying to build all this new stuff on top of nasty soil, right? So it's like, let's really make sure that what we're building is supportive for us. And then in week 4, we dive into actually creating that content plan and looking at boundaries and activities and how we can figure out where all these pieces go and how they work together. And then in week 5,
we wrap it all up. So this is like, we say the whole thing is fun, but this is like where you really get your hands dirty. So this is where you actually work on constructing your content garden. And this is where you see all of those ideas come to life. This is where you see everything like pull together. And so if you're someone who kind of feels like my content is always a bit all over the place, I don't see how all of the pieces fit together and how they become like a cohesive whole, this is the process, and the process that we go through in this final stage helps you to do that and helps you to pull everything together and make sense of everything, so that you're not just like staying on this never ending content hamster wheel, but you're making progress and consistent progress in the right direction. So through all of this, you also get access to both of us. And we make a big deal of saying this because, I mean, how many programs have you signed up for and then you don't actually get the support that you need? Catherine and I make it a really big priority that our students get support from us. They get access to us. This also happens through the private Facebook community that we have, where we can encourage each other, where you can share content that you're working on and get feedback on it. We also love to give lots of bonuses and surprises. We're always coming up with new ideas and new things that can help make your content life a lot easier. And so we're always giving that to you. A bonus that we've also added this time around is quarterly garden parties. So these are going to be super fun Q&A sessions and also kind of like mini coaching sessions as well. Our next one is happening on May the 20th. So if you join before that date, you also get the garden party included, and you also get lifetime access to the program as well. So our goal with this program is to help you kick those content habits that aren't working and to build a more intentional and fun and streamlined approach to your content. So all we ask is that you give yourself 5 weeks and we'll show you how to make sharing your message like pinch yourself simple.
All right, so this is one of our students from our last round of Cultivate Your Content. And Aileen said, if you're doing content, but it's not fun, you're procrastinating, or you're doing it because you have to, then this is for you. Cultivate Your Content isn't a rule book or a magic bullet. It's a guide to help you figure out how you want to show up through your content. It's a permission slip to have the freedom to be creative and experiment and make content fit what you want to do and make it fun. And by the way, Aileen did this amazing testimonial like video for us, and it's so her, and that's what I love. And so you will see Brogan and I posting that on Instagram in the next kind of week or so. And it's just awesome. Sorry, I breathed in and then choked on my own air. So here's a few things to talk about. Like, I don't know if I'm doing the right things. These are a lot of the insecurities and the questions that can come up for us with content. And so in module 2 and module 3, that is where we're really going to support you figuring out different ways that you can create content intentionally in a way that's right for you. Another thing that we can frequently say is I'm overwhelmed by all the content things already. Like, why or how could I take time to actually do a course like this, because there's already so much going on. And which is why module 4, which is about the garden, is so good, because you have to see what's actually on your plate. Like we've been talking about this on the call, when it comes to content, we have to look at what else we're doing, how much room and time in our lives content can have, and then build it out from there. And that's really what this course will help walk you through. Another thing that we say, or that we hear a lot and that I've said very frequently, is I don't know how to determine like the priority project, like what should be the most thing. And sometimes it's just because our schedule is a hot mess. And so module 7 and 10 really show you how to determine that, how to create a plan so that you can make it happen in a way that works for you. And am I really going to get the support that I need? So Brogan and I, obviously, we are really passionate about this and we want to show up and support you. So we do quarterly live garden party Q&A and coaching sessions. We are in the Facebook community answering questions, sharing ideas, and you get lifetime access to this course and the Facebook group. We don't kick you out. You get to stay there. So we just recently had somebody pop in being like, hey, I did this thing I was really excited about. I wanted to share it somewhere. And we're the perfect place to share those content ideas, get feedback from other people and from us. And last but not least, a lot of times it's like, I like the idea of being a community, but Facebook is just not a good fit for me. And so we highly recommend having a newsfeed eradicator, turning off notifications for groups that aren't serving you. Like, we are not like pro Facebook, woohoo, all the way. Like, we understand that there's a lot of downsides about Facebook, which is why we've been really particular in how we've set up the community and in trying to make it a really supportive place.
Yes, exactly. And this is what another one of our students from the previous round, Gleneth, said. And she said, if you're struggling with or want to level up your content, Cultivate Your Content is for you. Brogan and Catherine have created a safe place to acknowledge we all struggle with content with simple steps forward. I now have a much better idea of how to get back to the basics with my audience and how to share my content in a way that resonates with me. I learned I absolutely make content too hard on myself. It now feels right again. Okay, and so like we said, so you get lifetime access. There's also the Facebook community included, and every quarter we run a garden party. The next date again is May 20th, and all of this is available for $65 per month for 6 months. So we've made it super affordable. We've made a super easy payment plan so that it's accessible. And so if you are interested in joining us, we would love to have you. You can find out more details at cultivateyourcontent.com. Catherine, if you can pop that link in the chat for me, thank you. Yeah, and just to be clear, like to kind of like wrap this up, this isn't a program that will sit collecting dust. Like Catherine said, we're super passionate about helping you not only be intentional with your content, but actually to be able to create the things as well. And we love it when, you know, people come back and they come back into the group and they share things that they've been working on, things that they, you know, had planned for ages but had never been able to implement, and then actually be able to make them happen. And that's always really awesome to see those things happen. So like we said, yeah, if you want any more information, you can reach out to Catherine and I as well on Instagram, or you can reply back to any of the emails that we'll send. But all the details that you need are at that website, cultivateyourcontent.com.
Right, so good. So we're just gonna take 10 minutes and answer some of these questions that are coming in. And please, if you guys have any other questions about the actual program, just reply to any of the emails that you've gotten from us. And on that note, before we do Q&A, there's a couple people here who didn't get the workbook and the confirmation and stuff. So what I would love for you to do is in the chat, you can choose, most of you have been using the everyone, but you can actually select someone. So if for some reason you didn't get the link or the workbook before this call, select Brogan and send her a private message and say, hey, I didn't get it. Here's the email I used. And she can go back in and just make sure that you're all sent in. That way you'll get the replay and all of that information. We just want to make sure that you get it. So if for some reason you didn't get it, please send Brogan a private message with your email address. And we also had a request to send out that PDF of slides, so we can include that for you too in that replay email. So that I have made a note of that. All right. We had 3 really great questions and then another great point. So I'm excited to dive into this. We are going to try to limit ourselves to these next 10 minutes because we do want to honor your time and in what we're doing. But some questions that we got, the first one is, how do you plan your 2 weeks of content? Like, what are the small steps to take until it's out there? So I'll just give you a really simple example of what I do when I do a 2-week content theme. And so this question was asked by Jacqueline, just to confirm. So what I am going to do, and I had done this previously in the fall, and then I'd outlined it again for the new year, but as most of you know, my 2020 has looked pretty much nothing like I anticipated it to be. And so I'm just picking up my model of what was working in the fall, and I'm going to try it again. And if it doesn't work, I'll adjust, but I'm going to try because it was working for me in the fall. And so what that means is that week 1 of my 2-week sprint, I post an IGTV about a topic. So I choose an overarching topic for 2 weeks. So say something like schedule. I'm going to do a 2-week sprint about scheduling, but talking about daily energy and the time and energy formula and how we need to take that account. So I'll do an IGTV about that. And then the same week on Instagram, I would post a quote that kind of is in line with it. Then on that weekend, I would send my community a newsletter being like, hey, let's talk about this topic. Here's a link to my IGTV I did this week. Then in week 2, I would share a bit more of my story on Instagram and a testimonial. And then I will do a Facebook Live in my free Facebook community, elaborating on that and answering any questions that people in my community have. So that's an example of kind of how I take this theme and I reuse the content and share it in multiple places. So hopefully that is helpful and makes sense. Do you want to add anything in there, Brogan?
Yeah, so I was just gonna, it's the same as like taking if you've heard of the whole idea of like monthly themes before, it's taking that same idea but just like compressing the time period. And you can kind of do it either way as well. You can lengthen your time period if you have like a bigger theme that you want to talk about. But in terms of like how you can actually split things up into like, okay, I've got my 2 weeks, but like what actual pieces am I going to create? We do actually go through this in one of the modules in Cultivate Your Content. We talk about content remixing, and that really steps you through like how to take that core idea and split it into numerous different pieces so that you're not just kind of like copy and pasting the same idea, but you're actually, doing variations of the same idea, which not only keeps it interesting for you, but it also keeps it interesting for your audience as well.
Yes, so good. So one of the other questions that came in is running multiple businesses in the healthcare world that are intertwined. How does one link the content to each other? Is it okay to reuse content? The reason why I'm doing this one next is because content remixing, it is a thing. What you don't want to do is reuse content necessarily. You don't necessarily want to take content that you create for one place and put it in all of those places, because people on Instagram interact with content very differently than people who are on your email list. And they're looking for different things to you, and they have a different level of relationship. So that's why the content remixing that we talk about in the course is really important. And then the other question is, should it be repurposed? Like should the branding be really similar to kind of emphasize the connection? So how do you kind of link content? So Brogan, I'm going to let you, aside from content remixing, elaborate on that one just for a minute.
Yeah. So I think the important thing to note here is that there's no right or wrong way to do this. And I think it definitely depends on the subject that you pick. And I think the key here is when you're picking your theme, you don't want to go too broad, but you also don't want to go too narrow. So it's kind of like that whole Goldilocks thing of like, getting the kind of like the nice little balance of it in the middle. So you want your theme to be large enough so that you can break it into smaller topics, but you also don't want it to be so small that you're sitting there going like, you're trying to create your mind map and you're like, I got 2 things and then I'm stuck. So that's also a good indication that your subject isn't kind of like broad enough. But then in terms of how was it worded, Catherine? Was it about how do they need to like look the same or have the same branding or tie together in the same way?
Should it be repurposed? And then in brackets, branding is very similar to emphasize the connection between the businesses.
Oh, okay. So this is content for 2 separate businesses. Mm-hmm. Okay.
And connecting them and how to reuse them when there's so much in connection.
Yeah. Okay. So is there a reason why it is split into 2 businesses? I'm guessing if it is split into 2 businesses, it's because there's 2 very distinct audiences. And whoever asked that question, if you're still here, like feel free to add more details and stuff in the chat. Otherwise, I'm just going to kind of riff off on kind of what's coming to mind. But yeah, I think maybe take a step back and look at, okay, does this actually need to be split into 2 different businesses or 2 different audiences? Because if there's that much similarity in the content, maybe it doesn't need to be. Okay, awesome. Kristen, okay, good. I'm glad. Okay, so that would be the first thing. And maybe go back through like even some of those reflection questions that we had right at the start and like do a little bit of journaling around it and just look at, and map some things out and be like, okay, does this really need to be split? Is there a particular reason why I am splitting it? And does that reason make sense? And maybe it did right at the beginning, but now it might not make sense. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that would just be something that I would suggest that you look at. And then if you decide to combine them, I mean, that's going to make your life a lot easier because then you're only going to have one set of things that you need to create. But regardless of whether you decide to split it or not, I think in terms of branding, the only thing, it is a good idea to kind of keep things, cohesive and consistent. You kind of hear that around business all of the time, but I don't think that you need to think in terms of like cookie cutter templates and having everything look, super exact similar, like, thinking about, how things look on Instagram, if it's like, quotes or whatever, just as an example, like, it doesn't have to always look exactly the same. Sure, if you have struggled with content consistency in the past, that can be a great place to start, keeping like a template and just like replicating that to start off with. And then as you kind of get into the flow of things, then you can start being a little bit more creative with things and looking at how it works, how you could switch it up. Yeah, so it's just a couple of different ideas and things to try as well.
Yeah. And as we wrap up this call, because we're gonna end things here for you guys and let you go to your day, but I do think it's because one of the other comments that came up was kind of like, I find that my audience reacts more to pictures of me versus like infographic style. And what I have noticed and what I've heard from a lot of people that are in the social media field is that people really want to know the person behind the brand and the business. So that can be challenging for those of us that are more introverted, or we don't like to share kind of our personal lives, but even just showing our face and little snippets here and there, like people do truly want to get to know us, and they want to know the person behind the business. And so in all of your content, just the more authentically you show up as you, usually the more that will resonate with the people that truly want to learn from you. Brogan and I don't try to pretend that we don't interrupt each other and have a whole lot of fun, because the bottom line is we do. And that is just how we are. And we have very lively, exciting, we're both very passionate people. And so if you guys came to a course with us and we were like trying to be all like businessy about stuff, like it wouldn't fly. You guys wouldn't believe us. So that would just a comment on that whole aspect of, yeah, pictures of us and of our lives, those little sneak peeks that we give people, they really appreciate, because it feels very real and like we're connecting with them, which is what content is all about anyway. All of that is in our program. We talk about a whole lot of those things. But thank you guys so much for coming today and for joining us. And so glad that this was informative for you guys. Please reach out at any time. Reach out to either Brogan or I on Instagram if for some reason you're not getting the links and the emails, and we will sort it out for you. We want to make sure that you get everything. And Brogan, any closing words?
I literally had something as soon as you said that, it like completely disappeared. No, this is what I was going to say. And it was kind of linking back to the, how much of myself do I need to show and everything. With all of it, like start small. One of our clients, Gleneth, who she is also very good on Instagram stories, like we were talking about with Kate before. She shares stuff on Instagram stories throughout her day all of the time. But more recently, since she started doing cultivate your content, but cultivating her content too, she has started doing like a single like segment in her stories that she does face to camera. One segment in her whole story, and that's where she started. And so if you want to share more of yourself, but you're a little bit uncertain about it, or you haven't really done it much before, like start small. Start with one little 15-second segment. Start with one photo on your Instagram feed. Start small and then build up from there. And also don't think of it as like a constraint. Think of it as an opportunity to be creative. How can you show more of yourself but still keep your privacy, or still feel good about it? Because that can also open up a lot of doors creatively for you as well, and get you thinking in different ways of how you can make things work for you. So just keep that in mind too, and always like have fun with what you're creating. If it's not fun, I always say, if it's not fun, there's something wrong. So keep tweaking things, keep trying things until it feels really good, until it feels good for you. So thank you again so much, everyone, for coming and for staying right till the end. You guys are awesome. We're so glad that this has been helpful for you. That's awesome. And yeah, so like we said, we'll be sending out the replay within 24 hours. You'll get the email, and I will also, yeah, make sure that we include those slides and everything in there for you. Yeah, and if you have any questions, if you start creating the stuff that you've planned out today, like share that with us too. We love seeing the things that you make and that you create. It just gets us really excited when we when we see all of your new things pop up on Instagram or wherever it is. So yeah, be sure to tag us when you do publish things and put them out into the world.
Yay. Thank you guys. Have a
Yay.
wonderful day, and we'll talk to you soon.
Bye.